and you're on.
All right. As Brian said, my name is Paul Kay. I'm a conservation officer with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, and I'm stationed here in Des Moines County. Today we're going to go through a PowerPoint, talk some about the DNR in general, get more specific into my job as a conservation officer and what I do, and then we should have time for questions at the end. What is a conservation officer? So basically, we are a state law enforcement officer like a state trooper, but we focus on the hunting, fishing, trapping, ATV, boating, and snowmobile codes of the state of Iowa. We are part of the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. I know you had Lisa Lapp last week, right? That was in here, one of our state foresters, and you talked about the DNR. So we're just a small little part in here, and that is not showing up for some reason. Anyway, when we go to the state of Iowa, how many counties are there in the state of Iowa? Anybody know? 50? There's 99 counties. So there's 72 conservation officers in the entire state. So that means we don't even have one officer per county. So you can see some of the southeast or southwest Iowa areas, there's 2 counties per officer. So you're talking big areas. So here in Des Moines County, a county is usually about 40 miles by 40 miles. So you have 700 to 800 square miles, plus we have the Mississippi River, so there's a lot of area for us to cover. And when I have people around me that are on vacation or on time off, you're covering bigger areas than that. Here's our basically 91 certified officers. That includes some supervision, some other staff. We have an investigative unit that handles some bigger investigations. We have some undercover officers, whatever, but in the field there's basically 72 conservation officers. Our mission statement, it says, it is our mission of the Law Enforcement Bureau to protect the state's resources, to provide public safety, and to educate and serve the public. We enhance, promote, and protect the natural resources of this state through public relations, education, and law enforcement, thus ensuring future generations the privileges and benefits that we enjoy. So if you go back a little over 100 years, so our agency has actually been around since 1891. We're the oldest state law enforcement agency around. Why didn't you have state troopers back in 1891? Anybody know? What do state troopers usually do? What's a big part of their job? Yep. Did you have highways back in 1891? Did you have cars back in 1891? No, so you didn't have state troopers back then. You had people that hunted. So you didn't go to Hy-Vee or Fairway to get your food back then. If you had any markets, usually it was a lot of fish and game that was there. So you actually had market hunters back in the 1800s, and they would go out and they would kill huge amounts of deer, geese, ducks before any rules were created, and then they would sell that stuff. Well, it almost wiped those populations out in some areas. In fact, around 1900, they figured there were only 400 deer in the entire state of Iowa. There's probably 400 deer in the city of Burlington. So hunters got together and started enacting some laws because they wanted to protect the resource, and part of that was they created the job of a conservation officer to take care of some of those things. We are state peace officers, so we can enforce any state law. We could write you for speeding, for seat belts, any of that stuff, but we primarily focus on the fishing game, the boating, ATV, and snowmobile codes of the Iowa state code. So these figures are a little bit old, but Our bureau budget for the Law Enforcement Bureau, that's just a little part of the DNR, is about $14 million now. Starting salary is about $53,000. That's about 10 years old, 43. So it's not a lot of money, but you get to advance quick, and it's a job that you get to work on your own. So it has a lot of other benefits in through that. I said there's actually, this is old too, there's 72, not 75. Some of the bigger metro areas, so Scott County, anybody know where Scott County is? What that covers? Town, about North Quad Cities area. They have 2 officers in Scott County. Polk County, which is Des Moines, they have 2 officers there. But most of the state, it's either you're the only officer in the county, or you might have 2 counties to cover. We work out of our homes and our patrol vehicles, so we have an office in our home, so we don't have an office like the sheriff's department or police department to go to. It's basically at our home or our truck. We spend 90-some% of our time in our patrol vehicle doing that stuff. We're basically on call 24/7. You make your own schedule. There's a lot of flexibility with this job, so I'll schedule 2 days off in a week. That doesn't mean that you're gonna take your 2 days off. Since you're the only one in the county, and this is the fall, we're really busy, somebody poaches a deer or something, you're the only person they have to call. So you get called out a lot. You work a lot of hours at certain times of the year. So you're kind of beholden to your job at certain times, which is tough on families and family events because of that. We also have some recreational safety officers. So has anybody taken hunter education in this class? So once you turn 16, you're required to buy a license to hunt. After that, once you're 16, you have to take hunter education. Everybody. So we teach hunter education, we teach boating, snowmobile, archery education, ATV, fur harvesters education. Some of those things are required at certain ages to have, some of those are required regardless. So we have some officers in different parts of the state that actually help facilitate those programs, and then in the fall, they're helping with the enforcement duties that we have with the DNR. Then we have some supervisor staff, so we have a chief, and then we have actually combined it, so we have 6 district supervisors around the state, and then we have a licensing training supervisor and kind of a fleet supply manager because of all the equipment that we have to do our job and keeping track of with and keeping up to date with that. We have a turn and poachers program, which is like Crime Stoppers, but it's for poachers and polluters. And we have an executive officer that handles that. So we have an anonymous program. You can call this 1-800 number, turn in somebody poaching or polluting, and you can get a cash reward. And they take care of a habitual violator system. So if you go out and hunt illegally and you get tickets from me, each ticket has a point number associated with it. You get too many points and they revoke your license, so you can't hunt. Well, we have a habitual violator program, so if you're revoked in Iowa, you're revoked in all the other 50 states, so you can't hunt in other places also. So they keep track of other states. If you don't pay your fines for court costs, for child support, all that, they revoke your hunting fishing license also, so they have to constantly monitor that from other states and keep track of that stuff so people can't hunt in those states also. And then we have some other coordinators throughout some of our programs that we do. Our training coordinator, so we, I don't know, it's probably an older program why it's doing that. Since we enforce all state laws, so we do, the traffic, all the other laws, along with all the DNR related issues, we train a lot. We probably train as much or more than any state agency anywhere. One is because we cover such a wide variety of topics. The other one is we cover a wide variety of environments. So we're on the water. I can tell you handcuffing somebody in a boat versus handcuffing somebody on land is two completely different things. We also work in the snow and the heat and all that stuff, and the bugs, everything else. So we train a lot in those different environments because we're in those environments more than a lot of other law enforcement officers are. To be a conservation officer, you start out just like any other law enforcement officer would in the state, whether that's police, sheriff's department, municipality, whatever that would be. You're gonna go to the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy and go through their law enforcement program. Then we basically, once you get out of the academy, you have 6 months of training that you go through your probation and conservation officer, and you're riding with somebody through this probationary conservation officer program. And that's where we teach you some updated firearms, CPR, active countermeasures, defensive tactics, waterfowl ID, law enforcement driving, interview interrogation, wildlife enforcement, fisheries enforcement, commercial fishing enforcement, some of those specialized areas where you go through, where you're going to be required to know when a guy has a pile of ducks, whatever condition they might be in, what ducks are they? And fish and clams and mussels and you name it, all that stuff you've got to be able to identify. You're basically the expert for the state in your county, so you're going to have to be able to identify and see what that stuff is. Out of our job, about 75% of it is law enforcement. So that would be contacting fishermen and hunters, checking licenses, and then we also do the navigation enforcement. So we do all the boating, like on the Mississippi River, we do all that enforcement. So we're out there, we also do the ATV, snowmobile enforcement, and those are things associated with those types of enforcement. It's not just, I check licenses every day, so if I see people fishing or hunting, check their licenses, but we get calls from people in the public all the time, and it starts out the craziest. Could be some of the stories I have about stuff from just a little bit of shredded evidence ends up being a huge case. From that guy had like 200 some fish over his limit in his freezer, to there was a pelican there hooked on a bank pole was there. That guy's checking turtle traps. We had a case that's still ongoing this year. A guy had poached a big deer actually last winter. Got some information, had another guy tag it. It was big enough, this guy that tagged it, they did an article in this big hunting magazine that was all made up. We got some wind of that, started interviewing some people, investigating that case, went to do a search warrant at this guy's house that killed it illegally. Nobody was there. The next day, the sheriff's department calls and says, hey, what do you have on so-and-so? We're like, well, we were there with a search warrant. He wasn't home, he poached a big deer. He said, well, a friend of his was at the bar. This female picked up somebody, took him back to the house she just did a search warrant on yesterday. They beat him up, chloroformed him, stole his truck, dropped him off in Missouri, and now we're searching for this guy too. So you run into all sorts of stuff, like, so the FBI's involved in that now. It's a kidnapping charge. Like the people that we get in touch with, like it ends up in some of these crazy cases. And that's where making the case, we still have to follow all the rules of search and seizure and the Constitution just like anybody else. Since we're game wardens and we've been around for, 150 years, I don't know if there's kind of a stigma that we don't have to follow the rules. We just can go in somebody's house and look in their freezer. I had somebody several different times say, you're the only law enforcement officer that can actually arrest the president. I don't know if that's actually true, but that's probably not a good job for job security. But it's just because we use different techniques. So when I go to investigate something, I usually knock on your door. We'll talk about something. By the end of the night, we might be sitting at your kitchen table. I'm writing out tickets and you're giving me some coffee or whatever. With the police department, it's usually several officers that can bust down the door and do all that. We just do it differently because we don't have enough officers to cover all that stuff. So you have to be a little more sleuthy in your interviews. And so arrest, seizure, forfeiture, all that would be the same with any other law enforcement bureau. Court orders, simplification, search warrants, arrest warrants, all that would be the same as any other law enforcement officer. We also do, my pictures aren't loading very well. We also do all the accident and incident investigations for boating accidents, hunting accidents, any of those type of accidents. So if somebody shoots somebody, we just had Saturday, waterfowl hunter got shot in the face and ended up dying while they were hunting. So we'll do a complete accident investigation on that stuff. We have some specialized officers that bring stuff in to help with that. We've actually had people murder other people by hunting and said it was a hunting accident. And by our investigative things and going through everything, we actually were able to charge people with murder, first-degree homicide, because of that investigation, other than what looked on its face was just a normal hunting accident. We could actually go back and prove that it was, the intent was actually to harm that person. We also do the regulatory inspections for your county that you live in, so anybody involved with anything in wildlife. So if you're a taxidermist, usually anything that involves money. So game breeder, taxidermist, rehabilitator, scientific collector, bait dealer, fur buyers, ATV dealers, boat dealers, we're gonna do inspections on you every year to make sure that you're following the rules, that that everything that you're doing is up and up, especially when with money's involved, like it's commercialization of wildlife. That's usually when we end up with these big cases where people are killing deer illegally, selling the racks to different people. We've made some massive cases where it actually implicated Cabela's or Bass Pro Shops in buying some of this stuff that was illegal. And just like you buy a stolen vehicle from somebody, whether you know it's stolen or not, you're not gonna keep that vehicle, right? Like, and maybe you do know it's stolen, then you might be implicated in that. So Bass Pro Shop and Cabela's won't buy antlers anymore because of that stuff, because they've been getting burned and they'll lose thousands and thousands of dollars because of that, because it ended up that some of these cases are illegal. And then the second biggest part of our job, which is another 20%, so we're about 90% of our job now, is public relations and education. So we teach classes like this. We do our hunter ed, bow hunter classes for education requirements. We work with non-governmental organizations like Fitness Forever, Ducks Unlimited, to educate the public about the resource out there and opportunities to use the resource. And that's through working with adults in schools and workshops. So if you do any program you see, like in Iowa, we actually have a county conservation board group. So almost every county has a county conservation board. So our county conservation board here in Des Moines County puts on programs, and we're usually there helping them facilitate those programs, teach people how to hunt and fish and use the outdoors respectively. And then we have our DNR shooting sports. So does anybody participate in the clay trap shooting here for Burlington? Burlington has a team. I think out of the 5 high schools we have here in Des Moines County, everybody has a team. So West Burlington has a team, Minneapolis, they all have a Scholastic Clay Target team. We also have NAST, which is Archery in the Schools program. I actually tried to start that here, but you guys shoot like longbows, don't you, in gym class? Don't you do that here anymore? It usually depends on the PE teacher, but we have actually a Archery in the Schools program that's big in some schools where you compete shooting archery, basically. And then we have something called SAST now too, which is action pistols and rifles. So they have schools that compete in shooting pistols and rifles in competition also. Other activities that we do, we have bow, which is becoming an outdoors woman. So usually if you're an adult woman and you want to learn how to hunt and fish, kayak, any of those things, we put on programs for you to do that. Cooking classes on how to cook game and whatever. We have hunting conservation camp for boys, where same thing, or outdoor journey for girls. You're gonna go through all those things, learn how to shoot a gun, shoot a bow, how to clean a fish, where to go, and how to tie knots and different things like that. Stuff that was usually passed down from your father or mother to you, but if they never learned how to hunt or fish, you kind of just, unless you use the internet, you don't have anybody to teach you how to do it. We're back recruiting people and teaching people how to use the outdoors with that stuff. Youth Hunter Ed Challenge is another thing. Once you go through Hunter Ed, you can form a team, and they basically do like a Hunger Games skills competition for a Hunter Ed Challenge. That's kind of going down in popularity just because we have all these other programs, and we're competing. You guys are busier than ever with everything, it seems like. So it's tough to get people involved in some of these things. And then we have our miscellaneous duties. So we work with landowners. Somebody wants to improve the number of deer on their farm, or they want to improve the number of bass in their pond. We're usually the first contact with that to help them with that in some specialized manners. You can't see it very well, but that's actually an in-ground pool that's north of Burlington that had a cover on it, and there's a deer that broke through the pool that I had to lasso and get out of there. So anytime you have nuisance wildlife stuff, there's a bat in your house, or a raccoon under your porch, or a snake in your basement, guess who gets called? Usually the sheriff's department, then they send that to me. So that we deal a lot with nuisance animal or baby bird, injured birds, injured, baby squirrels fell out of a tree in a storm, something like that. We deal with a lot of that nuisance wildlife issues, get it to the right rehabber or euthanize it or whatever we need to do. The future, so when I started 20 some years ago, most people never had cell phones. In fact, the first phone that I had in my truck was a bag phone. So it was in a bag that you would plug in, and it was just like a corded phone in a house. Like, you couldn't take it with you, it wasn't mobile. Well, now, like, your phones are better than most of the computers that we had. They take pictures, they have text messages. So when I would show up at the duck marsh, I could sneak from blind to blind and check people, and nobody else would really know I was there. Now, the first person I check, when I leave, they're texting all their other buddies out there, and they know exactly, they say, hey, the game warden's here, so you've got to be even sneakier, because they're going to get all their stuff lined out, or people are going to leave or whatever before you get there. So technology has really changed a lot of things. And even before that, had no cell phones. It was just radios. You'd have a mobile radio back before between you and dispatch or other officers. So it helps with officer safety too. I mean, now I have 3 phones on me. I have my personal phone, I have my work phone, and now like this is a body camera. So some agencies have a different body camera. They go down, once you go back to your department headquarters, it automatically downloads the stuff. Well, we've got 72 officers scattered throughout the state, and my office is my home. So we needed to find something that we could take body camera photos with that would automatically upload, and the only option we really had was a cell phone. So I've got this big cell phone camera thing that all it does is record people. So technology's changed. I also have and most officers do now, have a computer in your truck, in your patrol vehicle for running people's driver's license information, background checks, records. We also have this program called Mock that will show you where all the other officers in the state are. And so they can see you and you can see them if you have an emergency, how to get to them, et cetera, et cetera. So the future will, like, who knows, with AI, I don't know if that'll ever change my job. I think if you guys talk about AI and what it's gonna do for jobs, AI is not gonna go out in the duck marsh and check people hunting, right? Like, you're gonna have to people, but like some jobs, maybe dispatchers, something like that could change, especially if it's something that's stationary and send information and gather information. There's going to be some more changes, and that's coming faster than we can keep up with it. Talk about the computers in the trucks. We have specialized officers now on jet skis and other things. Who knows what they're going to come up with in the future for recreational toys and whatever else. Drones. We don't have any drones in our department, but the State Patrol does, so we'll call them for searching for people, for helping recreate accident scenes, things like that, flying over, finding people that we've been searching for. So drones are gonna, I guarantee, are gonna become more and more a part of our everyday job duties, because it's so much faster and easier to cover ground in a short period of time for recovering information. You would think, does anybody fish in here? Kind of. Anybody hunt? I mean, nobody's been through Hunter Ed, so. You would think when you see, so over the years, our number, there's about 5% of the people hunt out of the population, and about 10% of people fish. And those numbers are slowly going down. In the Midwest, it's still fairly constant, but they are slowly going down. So you would think with the numbers dwindling a little bit, you would have less poaching or commercialization of wildlife issues, but that's actually changing. It's actually getting worse. So we're actually having bigger cases more often. So the illegal trade in wildlife is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And that's everything from endangered species, animal parts, birds, reptiles, you name it, across the globe. The poaching stuff, they're getting smarter, they've got more technology too, and usually they get it before we do. It's actually going up. The illegal sale and trade in deer antlers, all that stuff. These people are getting smarter and smarter and being able to track us and our movements easier than they ever have been. So, say you wanted to become a conservation officer. We have this, we're unique. We're one of the only, we might be the only state that actually has this program. And if you guys ever go out on the river in the summer, you probably see them. So we have these seasonal interns that basically drive a boat around and do boating enforcement in the summer. So that's how I started. I worked at Colburn Reservoir for a summer, and I worked up at Okoboji for a summer. You basically get to be us, just like us. You work alongside us. A lot of times we're working with you in a boat. You don't get to carry a gun, but you get to carry other fun stuff. And we get to see you working, and you get to see whether you like the job or not. So most of the officers now, since there's only 72 of us in the state, you usually start as a seasonal water patrol officer and go through that. And that's a great program if you're in, I mean, we'll have 300-400 kids interview for a dozen jobs in the summer. So if you're enrolled and you're in college and you're enrolled in a college program in fish and wildlife biology or law enforcement or something, that's usually the kids that we're going to focus on. The Parks Bureau actually has ATV patrol officers, so they hire the same thing. Instead of water patrol, you're going to basically be on an ATV. We have ATV parks where you can go to and ride your dirt bike or four-wheeler, go around. You're going to do the same activity and checking people do that stuff. And then like our seasonal patrol officer program, IowaDNR.gov, they're going to list those jobs on there. That's kind of where that goes for, and that's for any of our jobs. So the Law Enforcement Bureau is one little bureau of the DNR. We have state parks, we have Forestry Bureau, wildlife, fisheries. Then we have the ESD, which is Environmental Safety Division, which is the air, water, quality, pollution, that kind of stuff too. That's all in there, and they have seasonal jobs as well. Education requirements. Our job listing actually says you only need a high school degree. However, we have not hired somebody in 35 years that hasn't had a 4-year degree. So if you want to be a conservation officer, you're going to need a four-year degree in fisheries, wildlife biology, animal ecology, law enforcement, something along those lines, to just set the playing field level with everybody else. And part of that is we cover such a variety of topics that we can't teach you, even in 6 months, we can't teach you everything you need to know. You're going to have to bring some knowledge in with you on how the ecosystem works and how things work together and the biological status. Again, sociology, criminology, law enforcement, that might be another way to get a 4-year degree, to come in there and bring some knowledge with you to come in. And then having some experience, like if you've never hunted and never fished or trapped, I don't know why you want to be a conservation officer, for one, because that's the jobs that we use, but then like try to teach somebody that's never used a resource how to protect a resource is tough. And we've hired people like that. It doesn't usually work out very well because you're not going to know what to look for, where to look for it, and when to look for it at certain times of the year. And like I say, all of our hiring is going to be at IowaDNR.com, or actually it's Gov. Hints and suggestions. So this would be for any job you're out there. Don't limit yourself. So say you want to be a conservation officer. Well, there's only 72 of us, right? We usually hire every other year 1 or 2 people. But there's 50 other states that have conservation officers, and the IowaDNR has a lot of other bureaus, so you could maybe get hired in parks or fisheries or wildlife, and then you could transfer within. So don't limit yourself to one little narrow area. If you say, I want to be the conservation officer in Des Moines County, well, that officer might be there for 30 years before they retire. So you might have one shot at it in 30 years. So you're going to have to look outside of that, think outside the box, Work a variety of different summer jobs. A lot of these summer jobs you're probably not going to make very much if you get paid at all, but all this stuff looks good on a resume. So even if you volunteer one day picking up trash at Geo State Park, you could put that on there versus the person that hasn't done anything. So whatever job that would be, even volunteering looks good. Looks like you've done more effort than the next person to get out there and get a job. If you want to work in the outdoors, you need to play in the outdoors, you need to use the resource, you need to understand fishing, hunting, trapping, those types of activities to do it. And then you need to work on your communication skills. So that's every job. As a conservation officer, I might get a day's notice, I might get an hour's notice. You need to go, somebody needs a program for this, can you go teach it? And that would be whether it's 10 people, 20 people, or 1,000 people in a room. If you can't get up in front of people and talk, you're not going to make a very effective officer. And we're in a lot of different jobs, right? You need to be able to work on your communication skills, and that's probably the biggest hindrance for some people that I know that are really good with hunting, fishing, and stuff and outdoors. They cannot communicate very well. And our job in law enforcement is public relations. You have got to be able to talk to people. You've got to be able to de-escalate people. You got to be able to talk from somebody that's chemical engineer to somebody that never graduated high school. And everybody in between, you got to be able to roll the cob with them and talk to them and get to the end of the story the same way. So communication skills are a big thing. Take some speech, take some debate. I know some of those topics are not fun, but anything you can take that can help you will help you later in life, trust me. And then you need to be realistic and persistent. So you're not going to get hired in a supervisory role for your first job, right? You got to be realistic. You're going to probably have to start at the bottom and work your way up like it is in most professions. Then you need to be persistent. If you don't get hired at first, that doesn't mean that you're never going to get hired, but you got to try and try again, right? Keep adding to your resume, keep doing stuff. I was fortunate that I knew when I was a freshman in high school pretty much what I wanted to do, and that's to be a game warden. I set my sights on that. I know some people that were in college with me that still hadn't decided what career path they wanted. A lot of that is you need to try a lot of different things till you figure out, yeah, I don't like that, or that seems fun, and go through that stuff. Very rarely does a light just shine down, beam, and tell you, oh, you're going to be a doctor, right? Like there's got to be something along the lines that led you to that. So to get that, you're going to have to be persistent and follow that career path. Some sources of information for at least the wildlife side of things. Fish and Wildlife, iowa.dnr.gov. You have the Iowa County Conservation Board network out there. You have other fish and game agencies in other states. You have the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. You have the Park Service, Forest Service, Army Corps, BLM, Bureau of Land Management, some other federal agencies too. So it's not just the Iowa Department of Conservation or Iowa Department of Natural Resources Law Enforcement Bureau. There's many other law enforcement agencies out there that do some of what I do in specialized areas, even in the federal area. Okay. Questions?
How did you get into this career?
I started as a water patrol officer, so I knew I wanted to be a conservation officer, so I started as a seasonal water patrol officer, and that led me through finally getting hired full-time.
How has your career affected your family life?
So, as I stated, we're basically on call 24/7. I didn't get married until I was 43 years old because you're busy, right? So in law enforcement, generally speaking, the divorce rate is almost 80% in all law enforcement because it is very demanding at times, and that's tough on your family. Conservation officers is actually even higher than that because if my wife and I are heading to an event, be dinner or a wedding or whatever, and somebody calls me and says, hey, this boating accident just happened, I'm not going to the wedding, right? And that's tough, especially when you're younger, for people to realize that. So I've waited till I was older. We were both when you get more mature, you're kind of like, yeah, go ahead. They know that stuff. So, but that makes it tough on kids, family events, all that things. I can't count how many family events and birthday parties and whatever because of my job. Good or bad, it is what it is. Anything else? Anybody still awake?
I was telling these guys about how I admire what you guys do so much because everyone you get in contact with is generally armed.
Yeah, so pretty much everybody we contact with has a gun or a knife or both. And it's not like a municipality or a sheriff's department where they're probably gonna have their gun drawn and you know, we're basically walking right up there. That's why we train a lot to start seeing nonverbal cues and different things like that. Thank God 99% of the people we contact are decent people, but I'd have to look at the FBI statistics lately, but more conservation officers get injured and killed in the line of duty than other law enforcement agencies just because of that. So a guy could act like he's hunting and you go up there to check his license and he just turns and shoots you. That happens, but that's why we train a lot. Nonverbal cues, situation, you know, you're covering your concealment and you use those to your advantage on how you're gonna approach the situation. And sometimes, like I've had that, you get this little sixth sense where the hair stands up on the back of your neck and you're kind of like, I'm gonna wait for somebody else to get here, because typically where I'm at, if I call for backup, it's probably at least 30 minutes before somebody's gonna get there. So that means if you're injured, you're defending for your life, you have to be able to do that for 30 minutes before somebody's gonna help you, right? You don't think about that. It's all in the back of your mind. You don't let that control your life, but you learn how to approach situations to keep yourself safe.
Why did you want to be a conservation officer?
So we call it a calling, is what we call it. And you can tell the officers that you hire that have this inner calling because they're the ones that sacrifice day and day to do this job. It's just kind of something that I was naturally drawn to. Like I said, I knew when I was a freshman in high school, this is what I want to do. My family, my dad wasn't a big hunter. I have an older brother who wasn't a big hunter. We fished some, but I can't, it was just something innate inside of me that we call the calling. And I would say that's, maybe Brian had that as a police officer. Like, it's just something in you tells you this is the career path you want to go down. And we hire people that don't have that, but you can definitely tell the people that have it versus the people that don't.
The ones who don't struggle.
Yeah, the ones that don't struggle, yeah.
Usually get out of career quickly.
Yeah.
So would you say overall your career's been rewarding?
Oh yeah, every day has its moments. So I like to scuba dive. I love to fish. I was in Hawaii. This is several years ago, and I was on a dive boat, and they basically go out. You dive in the morning, you take a break, you dive in the afternoon, and one of the deckhands there was like, this is the 30th day in a row that I've had to do this, and like you're in Hawaii, beautiful weather. And all he has to do is take people on dive trips, right? So it can show you, regardless of your job, at some point it can become a job, right? Whatever you do. But day in, day out, like I knew this is a career for me, and I became a conservation officer, and yep, it's been great. I won't see myself do anything. I've done a lot of things. I farm too. I own a small business. Like this is definitely, I get up in the morning and I want to do this job. Which I would say, if you find a career, try to find something like that, because even at some point it's going to become a job. It's going to be tough. That'll get you through that hump. Like that'll keep you motivated and going all the way through. We actually require people, law enforcement officers, have to retire when they're 65. We've had several officers since I've been on that we were mandated to retire at 65. Law enforcement's changed a lot then. We don't see that as much now, but like they work 40 some years as a conservation officer and then were required to retire. Like they would still be working probably if they didn't have to. So they had the calling, they knew what that was.
You've got such a great job with so much flexibility.
Yeah, we have a lot of flexibility. It's a double-edged sword. Like since I'm the only person, something happens, you usually go, but I set my own schedule. If it's, say today is a big storm, it starts raining all day, I'm probably not gonna find a lot of people out hunting and fishing, right? So I might just be like, I'm gonna take the rest of the day off. I do work pretty much every weekend and most holidays, and that's by our contract. So my big days of work, I might work 12 to 16-hour days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because that's when people are out recreating. But then I might only work 2 days on a Monday and then have 3 days off in the week because of that. We don't get overtime, but we get what's called comp time. So if I work, so in a pay period, 2 weeks is 80 hours, right? If you work Monday through Friday. If I work over 86 hours, which is easy to do, I get time and a half off. So for every hour over 86 hours, if I work 88 hours, I'm gonna get 3 hours of comp time. So that you accrue that along with your vacation, your holiday time. So every holiday I work, I get time off. So Veterans Day, on Saturday, I worked 13 hours. So I get time and a half of that back off. There's been times where I actually didn't even notice it until it was too late, but I lost. You can only accrue so much, vacation, whatever. It was just burning it off the books because I wasn't even taking it. So the fall, we're definitely really busy. All the hunting seasons are going in. There's still fishing going on, commercial stuff. January, February are probably my slowest months. That's where I do a lot of school programs and different stuff. That's where I take a lot of time off. And then pretty much March, in the spring, you got turkey season, fishing coming on. Summer, you got all the boating going on. So there really isn't a big downtime in that. Who has the best doodle on their paper? You do? I've seen people do. That's good. Keep you awake.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.